It's the middle of winter, and most of our 16 laying hens are molting, so I'm amping up the protein content of their feed. Unfortunately, we've had to cut back on our egg consumption, but on the upside, I finally cracked the code on a delicious sandwich bread that I bake from scratch and that my teenage son absolutely loves. I'm excited to show you exactly how I prepare the bread, but first, let's go check on the chickens. I walked out of my front door this morning as a little bit of an experiment. Typically, in the mornings, I walk out of the back door and check for eggs among our laying hens. When I do that, at least one of them, namely Mabel, she'll fly out of the fenced area and come meet me. And here she is. Hi, Mabel. Little Mabel here is our fearless black copper Moran, who is always ready to meet me in the morning and remind me to bring the food for breakfast, as well as snacks in the afternoon. Isn't that right, Miss Mabel? Typically, I walk over to prepare and bring them their food, but today I want to do something a little different and bring you along with me. Good morning, guys. Good morning. Good morning, guys. Good morning. There's Tyrone, aka Ty. He's our main rooster, taking care of the ladies. No eggs today, and that's actually been typical for the last couple of days. So I will check again midday and see if any of these hens laid an egg. I'm not expecting any eggs from this leghorn, or this leghorn, or this leghorn, because all three, oh, actually, I'm sorry, this is an amber star, so she might lay an egg, but I know for sure the three leghorns that we have, they are the white feathered birds that have a comb that's folded over like bangs. Those ladies are all molting. They're usually about the same size as this amber star in terms of their feathers, but you can see they're quite a bit skinnier. And their feather pattern doesn't look quite as even as it normally does. It's not as smooth and even. And what is molting? Molting is when chickens, about once a year, they'll lose their feathers and grow new ones. And the reason that these ladies have stopped their egg production is because it takes a lot of energy for them to grow those new feathers. As a result, I have increased the amount of protein in their diet to help them along with that process. The same goes for our Americanas, they have sort of a dark gray or black base to their feathers and then these tan colors. But our black copper Morans, for the most part, they're still young. They're younger than the rest of the flock. Usually one of them will lay an egg a day. Oh, hi, Sandy. This is Sandy. Looks like Sandy is also molting. You can tell by these feathers right here. So she's not laying any eggs. Can you see Mabel? She's come back again. Mabel, your food is coming, I promise. Just give me a few minutes to put it together, okay? So because they require a lot more protein in their diet due to this molting, I started out trying to do that by adding a little bit of cat food to their food, which they accepted that just fine, but I wasn't really comfortable with it. I don't know, it just seemed a little odd. But what I have found has worked quite well is to actually mix in a little bit more of the grower starter feed into the layer feed, because grower starter feed for chickens has a higher percentage of protein in it, usually north of 18%, whereas layer feed typically has about 16% protein in it. This seems to really be a good thing for them. They like it a lot. Another thing I've been doing, because the temperatures have not been below freezing for the last week and a half, is soaking their feed overnight. So it's not frozen, not quite fermenting either, but it is giving them a bit more of the water volume that they need. My goal is to get it to a pretty thick pancake-like mix. Speaking of pancakes, I really would like to have some. I have a teenage son. I'm always looking for ways to cut costs, especially when it comes to our food bill, particularly at this time when we see the skyrocketing food prices in the grocery stores. And while ideally it would be awesome to be able to grow and raise and eat everything that's coming off of our land, the reality is we just moved here about a year ago, so we're nowhere near that point yet. However, one way that I have discovered has been a great cost cutter for us is actually making bread. Finding the right recipe for a good sandwich bread that he will consistently eat has been a challenge. I had a recipe that worked every time when we lived in Florida, and ever since we moved here, it's just been a totally different game. I know the difference in elevation and humidity levels can have an impact on things like flour, etc. Why am I bringing this up while I'm talking about my chickens? Stay tuned to find out. In the feed that I give to JoJo and the Avengers, I only include water with a splash of apple cider vinegar, but for the larger flock, I also add a calcium supplement. The purpose of the additional calcium is to strengthen their eggshells so that they're not thin and papery like you might find in a grocery store. If you want to learn more about supplementing your chicken's diet with calcium, check out this video. So now I'm going to check on the water levels for each of these flocks, see how much we need to replenish, if at all. From here I can tell that the layers, their water's good to go. And as for JoJo and the Buff Orpingtons, they've been using this waterer, again because it hasn't really been freezing lately. What on earth? How did that get in my hair? So I'm just going to empty out the debris that's collected at the bottom as a result of them just scratching around. Let me extend that leg again. And as you can see, it's filled right up to about here. Look at that beautiful blue sky. It's supposed to be gorgeous and clear all day today. Thank you for confirming, Ty. Now let's get into the bread recipe. First, I like to measure out my flour in a separate bowl using a weight scale rather than measuring cups for better accuracy. I start with 562 grams or 4.5 cups of all-purpose flour to get the dough going, and I keep another 125 grams or 1 cup of flour on the side to work into the dough while kneading. Here you can see I'm adding 2 tablespoons of sugar to a very large bowl along with 2 cups of warm water between 105 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm using a wooden spoon to dissolve the sugar in that warm water, and then added 1 tablespoon of dry active yeast. I like to whisk the yeast in to get it more dissolved, and as you can see, it is blooming nicely. While that's going, I'll take about 38 grams or 2.5 tablespoons of softened butter, and I like to actually melt my butter, not completely, but I'll just set it in a very warm water bath in a bowl and let it melt down just like you see here. Next, I'm adding 1 teaspoon of salt to the water, sugar, and yeast mixture along with that melted butter. Now I'm going to add in that flour, about 1/3 of it at a time, and then stirring it in with the wooden spoon. I don't have a KitchenAid or other type of electronic dough maker in my kitchen, so you will see that I am stirring using the wooden spoon and later on kneading the dough by hand. This is something that I have found just works well for me. I've actually purchased a KitchenAid before and I didn't even end up taking it out of the package. I don't know why. For me it just isn't really necessary and it takes up a lot of space. But if you do have a KitchenAid or some other device that you want to use to mix your dough, go right ahead and use it. I just won't be able to give you any advice on any settings that would work best for you in that situation. So here I am starting to knead the dough by hand, making sure that my hands remain lightly floured throughout. And the goal is to knead this dough for a solid 10 minutes. I want it to be non-sticky, really pliable. And now I'm using a little bit of butter rubbed into my hands to just coat the ball of dough. This is not a required step, but I just really like doing it before I cover it with a towel and then set it in a warm place for about an hour. I'm lightly flouring this surface, and as you can see, I've already buttered the 2 loaf pans before removing the bowl from the warm area of my kitchen and then punching the dough down. Now I'm going to knead the dough on this lightly floured surface for about 1 to 2 minutes. I pulled out the scale again to measure the total weight of the dough because I am not the best at eyeballing, splitting this type of thing in half. So I have found the scale to be very helpful to me when it comes to making sure that each loaf is about the same size. This is just the best way I have found to get both loaves to be as even as possible. Once I've measured both loaves of dough, I'll go ahead and start flattening out the first ball of dough. I basically flatten it out into a rectangle and then I roll it up sort of like you do when you're making cinnamon rolls. In this case, I chose to flatten it down with my hand, but that is completely not necessary. As you'll see with the second one, all I did was I kind of used gravity to my advantage to get it to flatten out a bit. And then I spread it out with my hands on the table and then rolled it up. And then I just left the rolled sort of log of dough in the pan. This dough has to do a second rise for about another hour. You'll cover it with a towel, and here you go. An hour later, the dough has risen. Set your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and then bake for 35 minutes. Here I have more butter. I like to have a couple of teaspoons of melted butter available so that as soon as it comes out of the oven, I can just paint it on the top and it just makes for a really delicious bread. You want to cool them in the pan for about 5 minutes before putting them on a cooling rack. The absolute hardest part about this recipe is allowing this bread to cool for about 30 minutes or so before slicing into it. But trust me, it is so worth it. Here you can see it's very soft, really nicely shaped. The coloration is great. Now I'm going to use this bread cutting board that I purchased from Amazon. If you'd like to purchase one yourself, you can check out an affiliate link that I have in the description for this exact model. It's really a great tool to use to ensure that you have evenly sliced bread. Click the link in the description for the recipe and let me know in the comments if you try it out. Contains a splash of apple cider. Contains a flat. Hi. Okay, you're ready to get down. That's okay. It's okay. If you're new to the channel and you haven't heard the story about JoJo and the Avengers, be sure to click this link at the top or follow along with this playlist at the bottom. Thank you so much for watching. Be blessed and be a blessing to others. Until next time.